These are the main reasons that I decided to start a bookkeeping business. First of all, it was super flexible. So I had a little baby at the time. I needed something I could do during her nap time or when she went to bed. Second, I had a friend who was a bookkeeper, and she helped me see that it was a business that I could start fairly quickly without a lot of overhead money, but then I could charge a really good hourly rate as a bookkeeper as a side hustle. And that definitely ties into the third reason, which is we were in a lot of debt. And so I wanted to put the money from my side hustle into paying off our debt. I'm Morgan, my website is FinePoints.biz, and I just got interviewed for a podcast. It's called The Successful Bookkeeper, and they asked me a lot about my background and how I got into bookkeeping, things like that. And I realized a lot of you guys might not know my whole story, like how I got started as a bookkeeper. And you may have pieced it together. I think I talk about it like here and there in different videos, but I thought I'd do more of a dedicated video on my experience starting a bookkeeping business. So let's rewind just a little bit. In college, I was an English major, so nothing to do with bookkeeping. So first of all, that's an encouragement. If you feel like you have no background in math and finance, that is totally fine. So I was an English major. I loved reading. I love writing. And then I actually got married right out of college. We'd been dating 3 years. So we got married and then we moved to Japan for a year. So my husband and I taught English in Japan, which was amazing. We did a lot of traveling. So that was a really fun first year of marriage. Then we moved sight unseen to Minnesota so that my husband could go to grad school. And so in Minnesota, I started working at the Target headquarters, and I ended up working 5 years total for Target, and I did a couple of different jobs. My favorite one was a copy editor. So I was actually using my English degree and being a copy editor. So fast forward 5 years into Target, we had moved back to Oregon. I didn't love my job at that point. And so when I had my first baby, I decided that I didn't want to work full time anymore and I wanted to stay home with her. And the financial decision of me quitting actually ended up helping spur me on to start a side hustle, which was bookkeeping, right? But for a while, I thought I actually might not be able to quit my job because our health insurance was through my work and it was going to be really expensive to change that. So that was kind of like a stressor, but we figured that out. And then we also had more than $100,000 in debt, mostly student loans from my husband's school. And I do have a video on this channel that goes into more about our debt-free journey, so you can watch that one after this if you're interested. So when my daughter was a year old, I felt like I had a little more capacity to do some kind of side hustle to make a little income to help contribute to our family. So that is, of course, when I started my bookkeeping business. So I had a pretty close friend who had started a bookkeeping business, and she actually had been advised by one of her mom friends to start a business. Her name was Andrea, and I just asked her a bunch of questions about her bookkeeping business, like how did she start, what training did she get, did she start an LLC, that kind of thing. So she was able, even though she didn't do the steps for me at all, she was there if I needed someone to answer a question quickly about bookkeeping. And another thing that was kind of helpful is there was multiple moms around me, in my friend group or acquaintances, that were starting small businesses or side hustles. And that kind of created an environment for me that I feel like, oh, I can do this. It's not outlandish. Because growing up, both my parents just worked traditional jobs for a larger company. So starting something that was entrepreneurial was kind of foreign to me, but it helped that there was other people in my circle doing it, along with the fact that I feel like I could start really small. I could just start with one client, see how it goes. If I like that, go to a new client. So it really does matter the people you surround yourself with, even if you don't know people in real life that are starting businesses. Now we have so many online resources where you can get that camaraderie. So read books about starting businesses, join Facebook groups, chat with people online. That really can go a long way in motivating you and just giving you the confidence to kind of set out on your own, because it is overwhelming. So I decided, yes, I'm going to start a bookkeeping business. The first thing I did was I took a class at a local community college. So now there's a lot of bookkeeper trainings that I'm aware of. At the time, I didn't know any bookkeeper trainings. I do have a free spreadsheet you can download with a whole bunch of bookkeeper trainings if you want to compare and contrast them. It has how much they cost, how long they take, what they teach, all that kind of stuff. So that's linked in my description box. It's called Bookkeeper Certifications or Training and Certifications. So I didn't have that when I started. So I just took a class at a local community college. I took it online. I didn't go in person. And that was helpful in just being oh, okay, I kind of get what QuickBooks is. But I 100% had tons of imposter syndrome. And I was I don't know if if I can work with clients. So what I did starting out, you've probably heard me say this on the channel before, is I did bookkeeping for free for about 6 months for a couple of my friends. So I said, those friends who were starting businesses, one of them was a jewelry designer on Etsy. And so I did her books. And I have a video about the pros and cons of working for free. For me, it was totally worth it at that point because I felt like Instead of like paying to get like an education, I was getting that for free, and then she was also getting free bookkeeping for her very small business. So for me, it was very worth it. So those were my first couple of clients. So I'd say, I don't know all the dates perfectly. I think that was like in the first 6 months or so. So I figured out how to do QuickBooks. I started an LLC. I got a really simple website and some business cards, stuff like that. And then I worked for those 2 clients. So I think that was like about 6 months that I felt like I was like getting off my feet. And I do teach a class that is like that middle section that's like opening the LLC, the website, and all that stuff. It's called Bookkeeper Business Coach, and it helps you start your bookkeeping business in 30 days. So it's supposed to be really manageable. It gives you like a few tasks to do each week, and then you check those off, and I teach you how to do them. And then of course, if you haven't heard of the free certification, that is the QuickBooks Online Pro Advisor certification, check out my video on that. That is a key as well if you want to start your bookkeeping business. So like I said, like that 6-ish month, like kind of ramp up period. And then I started getting like real good paying clients. And so a lot of my clients were from Facebook. So I believe I just posted on my personal Facebook page, hey, I'm starting a bookkeeping business. And for me, 10 years ago, Facebook was like a pretty big network of like everyone I went to high school with, everyone I went to college with. So that could reach a lot of people. So like someone that I was Facebook friends with was my husband's like law school colleague who had started a business. And so she lived in another state. So I wouldn't have talked to her about my bookkeeping business like in person, but because she saw it on Facebook and she kind of knew me and trusted me, she hired me as a bookkeeper. And a lot of my clients were kind of similar to that. It was like a friend of my sister, or like the place my mom worked. It was kind of like my close friends and family were a little bit of like my networking people. So they would maybe hear about someone that needed a bookkeeper and be like, oh, my sister is a bookkeeper, why don't you check her out? And then there was an accountant that went to my church. And so he would get really busy during tax time. So he'd be like, I have like this whole project that I don't have time for. And so he would like hand me a box of paper to organize or to put into QuickBooks. So if I'm remembering all the numbers correctly, I believe at about 2 years of like thinking about the bookkeeping thing, like not even like getting a client. So 2 years in, I had 7 bookkeeping clients. And that was kind of a mixture of teeny tiny clients, medium ones. One I went into the office every week, once a week, and then some random projects from this accountant. So it was kind of a mix, but 7 clients. And then kind of all along, maybe like a year in, my goal was that I wanted to contribute $1,000 per month to our debt, because that was one of our goals, was getting out of debt. And I did hit that goal. I think probably with like 5 clients, I could hit that goal. And then, you know, with the 7, it was like, oh, I got a little extra grocery money or a little extra savings. And so honestly, that felt like a really nice balance to me, because I felt like I was using my brain, I was helping clients, I was contributing to finances, and I also had tons of time to be home with my daughter. So briefly, some of the skills you might need if you're thinking about being a bookkeeper. First of all, you need pretty good people skills, because you need to be talking to clients. And a good side note is that once you get clients, usually they stick around. So you might not have to market as much as other industries, but you do have to be able to clearly communicate, follow up. Being organized is another really helpful thing. I had always thought of myself as someone quite organized. And so now you're basically just organizing finances, being a human who business owner can bounce ideas off of if needed. You also need to be a continual learner, because you'll learn everything and then it'll change a little bit. So make sure you're okay with that. Being reliable is really important, and having integrity, because you're dealing with people's money. And then just to continue the progression of me as a bookkeeper. So 2 years, I had 7 clients. I was making more than $1,000 a month. Then at that point, we decided to have another kid. So our kids are 3.5 years apart. Yes, 3.5 years. So I decided when I had a second baby to cut way down on bookkeeping. And so I passed on almost all of my clients. I think I kept like 1 or 2. Then I could adjust to life with a baby and a toddler. And honestly, for me personally, it was easier for me to adjust to going from 1 kid to 2 kids rather than 0 to 1 was my hardest transition, because I feel like I lost my identity in like this person who worked full time at like a corporate job. And then I was like totally in mom mode, and I was like, what's going on? But so when I had my second kid, I actually had an easier time getting back into work after that. Another thing I love about bookkeeping is that it's really flexible, so you can like ebb and flow depending on your stage of life. So that was kind of like the first 5 years of my bookkeeping business. I have another video called why my bookkeeping business was successful, I think, and that goes through the 3 buckets, starting with like the first year, then up to year 5, and then now up to year 10. And I can briefly tell you the last 5 years, but basically I've gotten more free time as my kids get older, which is nice. And obviously I started doing YouTube. I've always only worked part-time, so I work no more than 20 hours a week, and about 75% of my time is spent on YouTube stuff, filming videos, interacting with you guys. You know, I have courses I've made and just YouTube stuff. And then like 25% is bookkeeping, so I still have just a small handful of bookkeeping clients currently. I would love to hear in the comments why you started a bookkeeping business. Like, was it based on flexibility? Did you want to go like sailing through the world? Did you have little kids, or are you retiring? Like, what is your reason for starting? And let's chat about it in the comments. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you and your support and your kind comments. It means a lot to me. All right, I will chat with you again next week with another new bookkeeper video.